So, Ben, I'm going to have you fast forward us into this next period. And I'm going to call it, these were dark days. I was trying to think of a more clever way to say it, but these were darker days for Tennessee baseball. And some of it does overlap with Coach Delmonico, even though he goes to Omaha in 95, he goes to Omaha in 01, Berkey's team, he goes back to Omaha in 2005 with that awesome team. But think about this where's my stat? Okay, from 1998 to 2019, Tennessee never finished 500 in the SEC. Not once in that period. 1998 to 2019, that's 21, maybe 23 seasons. The Vols never even hit 500 in SEC play. And so, and you're talking about some good coaches. Like Todd Raleigh is a Jack Leggett disciple. He's got you can't call Todd Raleigh a bad baseball guy. He sired a big league all-star catcher, right? Like, this guy clearly knows baseball. Dave Serrano is one of the few living human beings who took 2 different programs to Omaha as a head coach. So I'm going to give you a premise, Ben, and I want you to take it wherever you want, because your coverage is kind of in the Serrano's era and Tony V. One of the things that I think hurt, by the way, like some of the assistant coaches too in those times, like Larry Simcox, Eric Thomas, Bill Mosiello. But one of the problems was, to me, for those coaches, the SEC East got nasty. Like, it got awesome. Like, Kentucky won an SEC. South Carolina got on a heater. Georgia was going to Omaha under Coach Purnell. And then the big problem was Florida and Vandy. But what say you, Ben, like, as you look back on that time period before Tony V takes over, why was Tennessee struggling so much in baseball?
I think the biggest reason was that there just wasn't a commitment to the baseball program. That wasn't the only reason per se, but I think it was the biggest issue that the baseball program was facing. I feel like today's era of college athletics, universities are more willing to buy into multiple sports rather than one sport. And of course, we know Tennessee is a football school. That's where the bread is buttered, and they're the ones that produce the money and whatnot. And I think during that time period, it was kind of football first and foremost, and then maybe check on some other sports here and there. Of course, during that time at Tennessee, you had Pat Summitt. Basketball went through basketball was struggling in the early 2000s before Bruce Pearl got in there and rejuvenated the men's basketball fan base as well. That was about the time the Weeklies, Ralph and Karen, made it to campus. So you had some other peripheral sports that were starting to have success. But I think in regards to baseball specifically, I just don't know that the proper resources were being submitted to the program. And on top of that, with Coach Delmonico, I mean, there is a parting of ways, because the university wanted him to do things differently than he wanted to do things. And it's easy to say now in hindsight, but I think it would be even easier to say at that time, whoever was assessing the program, like, why would you not trust Coach Delmonico to do what he wants to do and do it his way? Because he had obviously had a ton of success up until that point. So I don't think that the only issue was the fact that the proper resources were not being pumped into the program, but especially as you got closer to the Dave Serrano era and right before Tony got to Knoxville, I really think it became a big issue then, of just nobody really caring about Tennessee baseball other than the people that were actually within the program, and a couple of diehards here and there who were still left over from the Delmonico days and era. It's just it was not a priority. There wasn't support. And, it's easy for, I think, opposing fan bases to kind of chuckle at Tennessee and point fingers. I've seen this on social media during Tennessee's climb that, oh, nice of you to finally start caring about college baseball and whatnot. But how can you blame fans for not really committing their energy and their piece in their head as a fan, when the university itself isn't even pumping resources into the program or support into the program? So I think they fell behind because of that, where not saying that it was the wrong decision to prioritize football. I just think that baseball was left in the dust, so to speak, as a result of Tennessee being a football school. And I think you saw some of that at other schools as well. because you didn't necessarily have the history that an LSU has or some of those other programs inside of the SEC has. There's more specific things that we can talk about pertaining to each of the coaches before Tony. Dave Serrano specifically, I know his era a little bit more because as I was getting older and as a teenager and getting into college. But Coach Serrano had some bad luck along the ways. I've spoken to him, and he's admitted that he kind of got away from being his true self and kind of getting away from the things that made him a successful baseball coach. And he has some regrets of getting away and kind of letting the pressures of the job change who he was and how he went about doing things. So on top of some personal missteps here and there from Coach Serrano, there's also some bad luck involved as well. Berkey is well versed in that. Mookie Betts, they think Mookie Betts is on his way to campus, and I mean, at the very last second, he elects to sign and turn pro.
So you're saying that would have helped, Ben? You're saying Mookie Betts could help?
I think so.
Can you imagine?
I think Mookie Betts would have played well at Lindsey Nelson. So there was some bad luck along the way as well. Lane Thomas, you saw him hit a home run in the playoffs. He's a Knoxville kid, and he was signed to Tennessee and doesn't make it because of the draft. They had several instances, and that obviously happens at every school in the country. But when Tennessee at the time isn't as established as the LSUs in the world, and you have a couple of your top dogs, and then the rest of the signing class, it's a pretty steep drop off after those couple of top guys, and they don't make it to campus, then you're in a world of hurt. So I do think there were obviously some separate issues with each coach along the way after Delmonico. But personally, Berkey, I don't know how you feel about that long stretch of downtime, but I just don't know that the program had the proper support to succeed, even if you had the right people in place.
Berkey, let me tee you up on that for a second.
Yeah.
One thing I mentioned to Ben, and Ben brought up the point of investment and in the program, and I think that it can come off as a little cliche at times. Like every coach in the free world says that their program needs more investment. However, I can see the disconnection here, like Ben's pointing out, because Coach Delmonico spoils you as a department because he's getting to Omaha over a decade period with whatever the investment was. But what the school the athletic department can't see coming is, hey, by the way, the two programs that are going to be the program of the next decade, the 2010s, are actually in your division. One of them is hours away from your campus. Like, that's going to be a problem. Like, if you think spending the same check is going to, and then that doesn't even include South Carolina playing in the national championship game 3 years in a row, winning two of them. So I hadn't really thought of it that way because it does feel a little cliche to me, but what I think the school didn't see was in that division, which was always strong, the temperature got cranked way up.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think at the end of the day, if you look at Virginia, Louisville, Vanderbilt, and now I'll say Tennessee, Runes, forgive me if I'm missing somebody recent, maybe TCU with Schloss showing up, like programs that had little to zero history, and the right dude shows up. I think what's been proven is the administration eventually gets on board.
Yeah. And
so not to discount anything Ben said, but, I was at Tennessee when it was, I wouldn't say our program was in great shape when I was there, but we had a great season. It was coming off a stretch where it had been a great program. And so I knew that it could be that, but I remember when it was going through its valleys, how many people in the national media said it wasn't a good job. And, I knew the fan base was so supportive of winners that if the right guy got in there and started to win, that it would immediately garner. I mean, Bruce Pearl did it in hoops, right? You just knew that if the right guy got in there, the rest of the pieces would fall into place. And that's not to say those other guys weren't the right guy, but Tony had the right formula that those other guys that I mentioned had, which is and I know we're not to Tony yet necessarily, but he just wins in player acquisition. Like he's just really good at getting really good players. But I think, again, if you go back to O'Connor and McDonald and Corbin and Schlossnagel, guys, and I'm not discounting O'Sullivan, like you said, or and really even Tanner. I guess, South Carolina probably didn't have a ton of history. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
They were okay. Yeah, it was yeah, just fine.
Probably not as much as Florida. Florida probably had a little bit more. But you think of Florida as being a sleeping giant, whether they're always good or not, right? Nobody thought Virginia was a sleeping giant in baseball. I know for a fact nobody thought Louisville was a sleeping giant in baseball, right? And so I just think Coach Delmonico, and I think obviously now Tony has proven, and then again those other guys that I've named, that like to a degree, there's a lot of programs that can be great programs if the right dude can put all the pieces together.